Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Prof J, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy
Guillaume,
to have you.
Thank you. Good evening.
It is my absolute pleasure. Let's jump straight into it. What got you into leadership development and consulting, Prof J?
Wow. Okay, so my route into leadership development probably began in the classroom many years ago. It's been over 30 years I've been training, but the consulting side of it, that actually began by watching organizations struggling with their people and with their people strategies. And what I encountered was that I was seeing very capable people, professionals, being promoted into leadership roles, but no one had ever had or shown them how to lead people or how to lead teams. And these professionals were great in their jobs because they understood what targets were, what processes were. They understood what reporting structures were. But when it came to conversations or influencing or accountability, and actually building trust, that's when things started to break down. And it was that gap that truly caught my attention, because over time I realized that most of the organizational issues, they weren't always technical concerns, but they were people issues. And I found that teams started to disengage, or managers avoided those difficult conversations. Leaders struggled to align people behind any changes, and organizations in general often found that there was a response which didn't improve any leadership behaviors. So I actually found myself naturally stepping into those spaces of being a coach to my colleagues, supporting managers, helping people think differently rather than just telling them what to do. And I suppose that's where my philosophy started from. And that's exactly where Aspire Consulting and Training came from. A simple idea that leadership has got to be practical, not theoretical. It's not something that only works in workshops or training environments. It's got to be something that leaders can use in real conversations on a daily basis. And that thinking is what eventually led me to my framework, like the TAP-C empowered coaching method. That helps leaders move from telling people what to do to partnering with them to achieve the outcomes that are required. Because the moment people feel ownership instead of instruction, you start seeing that everything changes. And I suppose there's a personal element in life as well, because life experiences, challenges to health, that forces people to rethink what leadership really means to you. And I actually stopped purely focusing on my successes and started looking at how I could help other people succeed in a sustainable way. And I suppose that's exactly where Aspire started taking shape.
Fair enough. I guess you've kind of alluded to it already, but all that leading to you solving what problem specifically? Like, what is it that you help people achieve?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not a fan of the word problem, because that brings out more problems. And when you bring out more problems, it brings out more problems. And people aren't looking for solutions because they're concentrating too much on the problem. So the core issue for me is quite simple. It's about looking at complex ways and making them simple. So what I mean by that is when you've got organizations who are consistently promoting excellent technical people into those leadership roles, and as I said before, they're hardly ever supported how to lead people. And the result in that becomes very predictable, because managers become task controllers, or the teams are waiting to be told what to do, and accountability, that becomes blurred. So innovation, whatever's been brought in, starts to slow down. That's when you realize that leadership becomes reactive rather than intentional. So what I've noticed in my role over the years is that most leadership failures don't come from that lack of knowledge. They come from conversations that have never happened. Excuse me. It comes from feedback that's never given. Expectations aren't clear. Ownership isn't transferred. And small issues sometimes become bigger problems over time. So the work that we focus on in being able to support this is building on 3 core capabilities that supports these challenges, problems, issues, or whatever. And those are, firstly, it's about clarity. So when we talk about clarity, it's, can leaders communicate direction and expectations properly? Then the second is about conversations. Can they handle the discussions that actually drive the performance of their people, of their teams, of their organization? And then thirdly, it's ownership. Can they create an environment where people feel as though they feel responsible for the outcomes that are required, rather than just like all other people, just following instruction? And to be honest, that matters to me personally, because I've seen the true people cost of poor leadership. People lose confidence. They lose talented individuals. Those talented individuals, they disengage, and organizations waste a huge amount of potential. But I've also seen the flip. I've seen the opposite side to that as well. So when leaders get it right, performance starts to improve, and it improves quickly. Then you see teams becoming more self-sufficient, and the culture becomes stronger without constant pressures from their managers. And that, for me, that's when the shift starts to be created, and that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for.
So I like the perspective on the not thinking about it as problems. What I'm trying to get to, Jay, is what's the benefit of all this? Like, talk to me like I'm the CEO who's going to have to, final vet the budget to work with Aspire. Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, sure. I mean, everybody wants their team to feel better, more empowered, like more flexible, more reliable, more adaptable. But what does that mean for my bottom line?
That's a really good question. And do you know, the way I look at it is about taking things back to basics. Sometimes people, CEOs, leaders, whomever, they can get caught up in this maelstrom of strategy, of innovation, of technology, and they can say, this is what we want to do, but they forget, what do we need to be doing? And they start putting all those investments in what they want, but they need to be developing their people to understand the new skills that are required for this new technology. So as I say, it's about taking things back to basics, because we don't want people not to feel challenged by innovation. And if I'm able to have that conversation with a CEO or with a C-suite, in which they're actually understanding that they may be the problem in this situation because they're looking at the bottom line and not the people, what CEOs and C-suite and managers forget is that one of the biggest assets any organization have is their people. And if they're not engaging with their people, if they're not developing their people, that investment or waste of money, that goes somewhere else where somebody wants to feel invested in, as opposed to just being a number or a figure or whatever within the organization.
Do you have a specific niche, industry, company size that you typically help?
No, do you know, I'm really fortunate because I work with so many different organizations. I don't have any ideal clients, if that makes sense. I've been really fortunate that over my 30 plus years, I've worked with different types of organizations going through similar issues. So they could be organizations that are going through some type of change, and it could be ministry, government who are going through changes in public service or their strategy. It could be industries, businesses, companies that are adapting or adopting AI or new technologies. It could be businesses that are potentially expanding internationally, or maybe scaling down. So there's no preferred niche. I think it's more about the people. I don't mind which industry I'm working with, as long as the people that I'm working with recognize the purpose and the need of who I and who Aspire are. And for me, it's about building that strategy or building that bridge between the strategy and execution. So again, it goes back to, I don't mind what type of industry sector. Currently, I'm doing a lot of work with the oil sector, oil and gas sector. Unfortunately, a lot of that work is in the Middle East. So that does have its challenges and its impact currently. Working with government bodies out in Southeast Asia, who are fantastic, because those are people who are very stuck in their way. And to listen to an outsider, to be able to work with them and make them understand that they do have a cultural intent, but the people I enjoy working with are the ones that understand we need to move away from our culture as a country to a culture as a business, and maintaining and sustaining that change in mindset.
So that's interesting. I hear a lot of people on this podcast basically break down that they are industry agnostic, which I understand, right? And which can happen when you're focused on one expertise. Many people can benefit from this expertise. At the end of the day, and I'm sure you've had that saying in your space, organizations are led and powered by people. So everybody needs to deal with people and have better people.
Yeah.
The thing that I can't help but think is, say I'm an oil and gas company, right? And I'm looking at support for all things change management. Of course, there is the change management consultants and coach, but then there are the change management coach and consultants for the oil and gas industry who've only helped oil and gas industries. And like consciously or subconsciously, I'm always going to be more attracted towards the one that has helped specifically people like me. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work the other way around, but that's how I like to think about it. So for you, Jay, what has worked for you guys and Aspire to market effectively, brand effectively, basically get leads through the door effectively when the service can be for anyone? How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what you were just saying about the space. What sort of spaces do we work in? And you're absolutely right that if an industry sector, if an organization, a company such as oil and gas is making changes, then they will go to the specialists that deal within that sector. However, when you talk to consultants like myself and my colleagues who are similar in the same mind space as I am, we're able to see things differently. And it's exploring and taking that mind shift away from oil and gas to success of new ways of working. Because absolutely, someone who's a consultant within the oil and gas sector or within the pharmaceutical sector, their mindset is set purely on that. But then you might find that they're too closed to look at new opportunities. Whereas someone like myself going into work with certain industry sectors, I'm working with people that have already got the experience. But sometimes those individuals haven't been given the opportunity or the chance to let that experience come out. So to be able to come in and ask those specific types of questions, so tell me what you would do in this situation. Why would you do that? What would be the challenge with that? How would success look? And if I'm looking at that as an outsider, as an outside consultant, what that does for me is it allows me the opportunity to guide them into getting them to think my way, but making them think, actually, that's our idea. They are the experts at the end of the day. but sometimes they're not given that opportunity to put those challenges in place. So it's understanding that the relationships that we build and how Aspire and my team and I do our work is making sure that people understand that we've got the understanding and the knowledge that we're there to support them in that space. But the experience is coming from them, and us as consultants, we're just formulating or guiding them and supporting them, and dare I say facilitating them to change their ways of working. So from a strategic perspective, I love using brown paper mapping exercises and having a group of C-suite in that room and starting to put things together. And as a facilitator, you start seeing that we see things differently as opposed to an industry specific consultant. And that, I think, is where our advantages come in. And that becomes our powerful driver, or my powerful driver, because I'm demonstrating how I can get them to think differently or curiously. I can get them to challenge the norms as opposed to having this standard or focused structure. And that's where I think I love being in that space. I love being in front of a group of people talking about their challenges, their successes, their inputs, their outputs, their leadership, their accountabilities, and their roles within all that success. And do you know, I'll be really honest with you, it feeds into my professional ego as well, because let's say confidence. It feeds into my professional confidence because I know that I'm leading them into the right space of success. And they start asking the right questions, which may not always be specific to their industry, but it's specific to their people and their development and the structures that they want to introduce, or innovations or technologies. So that's what I think the differences are there.
So that makes 100% sense. I like and that's something we do ourselves. Like, hey, we are helping people in complete different industries, but sometimes what you need to do is not look at what people in your space are doing, but rather what parallel industries are doing, and take what they are doing that your industry is not, and merge it together, and maybe you're onto something then. So I like that. That's the positioning and the messaging, which I like. How do you market though, Jay? What has worked for you to get those people through the door? How do you generate leads?
So I said before, it's very much a relationship-driven environment that I work in. And I work with people that trust me and I trust them. And to be perfectly frank, the majority, I would say 85 to 90% of our business comes through referrals. It comes through existing relationships, international engagements, talks that I might be giving. If I've delivered an impact somewhere, then it's heard about and people want to know who's managed to achieve that. So there's an element of word tends to travel within the industries and within those networks. The one thing I don't do, and in all honesty, I don't think I've done it for many, many years, is cold outreach. So I've not actually done cold calls. What I do in certain situations is when I've put a piece on LinkedIn, I always put the shout out at the bottom. If you're interested, get in touch. And that drives more traffic to me. But I've not really explored cold calling or cold outreach because it's not actually worked for me in the past. And I don't want to, I use the word invest and waste. So I don't want to waste time if I'm not getting as many callbacks. I'd rather be investing my time working with the people that I trust and who've got the networks already to actually go through that process for me. And as I say, that works for me because it's easier for me. I can honestly say it's very rare that I've made a call out to people and asked them if they're interested in Aspire working for them or with them.
No, I like that. And so when I mentioned marketing, I didn't necessarily mean cold outreach, right? It's just anything that will get the attention of your ICPs, of the decision makers, Cold outreach is one for sure, but there is also, so I was just taking notes at the same time. So LinkedIn is marketing, right? You're talking about the stuff that you do. You're having a call to action at the end of the post for people to engage. But any form of content really is marketing. SEO is marketing. Speaking at conferences is marketing. Sending postcards via the mail is marketing. So that's what I was trying to get to, because when we are industry agnostic, right? The question that I always have, and that I know consultants listening to this show have, is, okay, I'm the same, but then how do I get the attention of the right people, right? It's always when you speak to everyone, no one can relate to it specifically. So that's why it's interesting, people like you who are making it work, obviously, interested to know how they get there and how they market. So LinkedIn, that makes a lot of sense.
I have to just sorry to interrupt, off the back of that as well. I think the brand works a lot as well, the Aspire brand, because genuinely there are so many Aspire companies out there that do training, that do consulting. And I do get phone calls, or I do get emails coming through asking the question, are you Aspire that does leadership training, that does coaching, that does marketing? I'll say, absolutely, yes. Where did you hear about me? Oh, we did some work with you in the past. Really? Okay. And then I'm very open and honest and say, actually, that's probably somebody else. But what is it you're looking for? And how did you get my details? So how can I support you? And I don't want to take you away from someone you've worked with, but let's have that conversation because we're there already. And that also works. It's a bit cheeky, but it works. And if they ever turn around and say, well, we used Aspire in the past and we had a really bad experience, I'll ask about the experience and say, I'm so glad I'm not them, because, and so that works in so many ways as well. And I think one of the other key things as well, from a marketing perspective, again, this is my ego. I think the person sells as well, because from a networking perspective, when my clients go to other people or are talking within their network, one of the key things that comes out is, oh, have you spoken to Prof J? Oh, is he the guy from Aspire? And that shows you how the brand or the name actually precedes you. And that's great, because that's where relationships are also built.
No, I like that. And that does make sense. It's I don't know if it's cheeky, but if it works and it doesn't hurt anyone, then hey, why not?
Absolutely.
How do you move from those conversations, Jay, from someone reaching out on LinkedIn, someone calling you because of the Aspire, thanks to the Aspire brand? How do you go from that to a closed deal? So how do you trigger a first conversation, a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement, we rock and roll? Can you walk us through what sales motion look like for you?
Yeah. Again, to be very transparent, I don't have a process. It's a very fluid conversation. Firstly, I think I said at the very start, it's not about it's about understanding what the wants are for the organization by having those initial conversations and finding out what they want. Then it's understanding through that conversation what those needs are. And within that conversation, it's trying to pull out what their budgets are as well. Like any consultant will tell you, clients are very, in some cases, they're very open with this is what their budget is. In some cases, they're very closed. And it's trying to work out what their potential budget would be. What I always find, though, is just by having conversation like you and I are having, and then asking the right types of questions. I use my TAP-C method, which is the tell, ask, partner, commit. So first of all, I say, okay, tell me exactly what it is that you need. Tell me why you need it. What are the challenges that have brought you to this point of needing this? So what would that need look like? And when do you need it by? So if I was to offer you something today, what would good look like? What would that potentially look like? If I was to offer you something off the shelf, which I don't offer, but if I was to do that, what would you expect? And what would the outcome be in what space of time? So I would be pulling out as much information from them as possible to lead into the partner aspect of it. Because in the partner, I would then say, well, okay, so these are where my skills come in. I'm able to deliver a leadership training program that fits your needs and your requirements. This would either be a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or even a 12-month leadership program for your 15 delegates that you've been talking about. this is what it would look like. How would these particular modules fit within your department, within your division, within your strategy? Why would it fit there? So when would you want that to start happening? When do you want to see the successes? When do you want to see the figures coming through? And then the closure would be the commit by saying, okay, so what you've told me over the past hour of our conversation is that you want this, or rather you need this, you need this, you need this. This is what we can offer you. This is what we can provide for you. This is when we can do it by. This is what you will do in order for that to happen. And then our next conversation is going to be, how do we make it live? So I follow a process in that respect with my TAP C, but I make it as fluid as possible. And that's where my conversations work best, because I want them to feel as they, or rather I need them to feel as though they're leading the conversation, but I know that I'm actually controlling that conversation to where it does need to be going.
That does make a lot of sense. Jay, you've kind of, you've been flying through this interview. So I'm going to ask you a little bit of a curveball question now.
Okay.
What's don't worry, it's actually an easy question. What's your number one challenge right now? What's the one nut that you're trying to crack that, you know, once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be for you?
Do you know, I think the number one challenge, or one of the challenges, is scaling. You know, there's a growing demand for practical leadership frameworks and coaching-based approaches, but leadership and consulting often depends heavily on the individual or the department or the business that's leading it. So the question becomes, how do you scale without losing depth? And that leads me into focusing on how do you translate ideas into structured frameworks and programs for others to use effectively, for the clients to use effectively, without diluting any quality at all. So that's where my scaling brings in my TAP C and my Aspire 6 principles to leadership frameworks. They become part of that journey. So it's about, I would say it's about ensuring that the thinking can reach far more than just organizations, but it can actually reach individuals within those organizations as well. So you find this cohesive bubble and ecosystem of success. And that's what I like doing. So those are the challenges. How do you create those ecosystems of success? And again, the challenges there are working with organizations that are very structured in their cultural ways as opposed to business ways. And that is one of the biggest challenges. When you start making them understand what business is compared to culture, and trying to move certain cultural aspects of a business strategy out and bring in more dynamic business strategies into their processes on a daily basis, you start seeing the changes, not just in the strategy itself, but in the people, in departments, in successes, through conversation, through communication, and through their integration of success.
Oh, sorry, I thought it froze. My God. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on the other side of the coin, Jay, so thanks for sharing this, first of all. The reason I'm asking these questions is I know consultants will be facing the same challenge as you are right now, and it's always interesting to, you know, hear from your peers how they are thinking about solving a specific challenge.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, what do you see as one of the biggest opportunities out there in the next, 3 to 6 months for your business?
Oh, fantastic. Do you know, for me, again, I think that's a really, really valid question. I've been having conversations with my clients about exactly that question over the past week, 2 weeks or so. For me, it's looking at the intersection of technology and humanity. And what I mean by that is about being human-centric. So the fact is that organizations are starting to look at and investing heavily in AI, in technologies, automation, digital transformation, whatever type of business you are, they're looking at expanding into it. But the success in those particular investments depends on that leadership capability. So I think that's the opportunity here for me as a consultant, because for me, it's not about technology failing. It's about the adoption that fails. And you get companies that are buying or purchasing or integrating new systems that don't work because they haven't actually supported or upskilled the people that need the training on these particular new innovations. So it's about helping them, helping leaders and guiding them through that uncertainty and the uncertainty and the change, and managing. And I think this is a biggest issue as well, or opportunity, managing different generations working at the same time. Because when you're working across different generations, working across different cultures, decisions become rapidly changed and environments get rapidly changed. we can see, or what we should be seeing, is a shift from leadership as authority to leadership as coaching. So coming back to your question for the next 3 to 6 months, that's where I would be looking at having conversations. How do we change that tactic? How do we change the growing need for leaders who can build that trust, create a psychologically safe environment, and still deliver the performance that are required for those different industries? And it's also about taking or moving people from complex theory, because it's taking them back to basics. We've got so much technology, so much innovation, but sometimes the simplest back to basics approach is the best approach. That's what I see anyway.
Back to basics. I think this is a good word to finish this episode. Prof. J. Acharya, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, Jay.
No, perfect.
Was that good? Cool. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
You can go to my website, which is www.aspire.me.uk, or you can email me directly at j@aspire.me.uk.
We will put all the links and the email address in the description. For what I'm concerned, I can say that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview, Jay. I just added you. Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.